I'm looking forward to this presentation and thank you so much to Dr. Gladys Rowe and Laura Horodecki to come. I've known Laura the since 2016 or 2015, whenever the IOIMH happened in Montreal. So it's really nice that we have so many of the people in this group today, like we have these sorts of long histories with. So the title of the presentation is Reimagining Impact, a Decolonial Approach to Evaluation at Huddle, Integrated Youth Services in Manitoba. Dr. Gladys Rowe has a master's in social work, is Swampy Cree from Fox Lake Cree Nation in northern Manitoba, and also holds relations with ancestors from Ireland, England, Norway, and Ukraine. She currently resides on the occupied lands of the Duwamish and Suquamish peoples in Washington state with her family. Gladys's research focuses on fostering decolonization and Indigenous resurgence at individual, organizational, community, and systems levels. This has included her work in social work, maternal child health, Indigenous full spectrum birth work, interdisciplinary arts practices, systems transformation, Indigenous innovation, and Indigenous evaluation. Gladys is a scholar, filmmaker, poet, author, facilitator, researcher, and evaluator. She takes an interdisciplinary approach to her work and loves to think inside the circle when it comes to transforming the futures we are living into. Gladys supports critical reflection, expression, insights, and knowledge mobilization within research and evaluation through storytelling and arts-based approaches, including poetry, photography, photo elicitation, film, collage, painting, and clay. She's the host of Indigenous Insights, an evaluation podcast where she sits in conversation with Indigenous leaders across Turtle Island and beyond. And she's collaborated on many projects, including the Stories of Decolonization film project and the book Living in Indigenous Sovereignty. Laura Horodecki is the evaluation and research lead for Huddle, which is Manitoba's Integrated Youth Services Initiative. She holds a master's in public administration and brings leadership experience across health and social services. Throughout her career, Laura has focused on youth mental health, primary health care, food security, and community development. She's very passionate about co-designing community-driven programs and ensuring services are accessible and responsive to the needs of young people. In her current role, she's leading the development and implementation of a shared evaluation framework for Huddle. She's also actively involved in applied research that drives systems change, and as a co-investigator and principal knowledge user on multiple CIHR-funded projects. Laura works at the intersection of research and practice to inform better policy programming and cross-sector collaboration while centering youth voices and experiences in the process. Over to you, Laura and Gladys.
Thank you. I'm gonna get started sharing my screen here. I appreciate the introduction. You just did a lot of work for me in the introduction that I was gonna share. So thank you for that. Danse, my name is Gladys Rowe. I have been walking with Huddle in the evaluation work alongside Laura as a learning partner. It'll be coming up to a year, but we've been planning this partnership for a while. So we'll jump in and share about our work together. And Laura, I'll pass it off to you if you want to introduce yourself in any additional way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gladys. Hi, hello to all of our friends who have gathered here today, connected by this wonderful network. As Vidya said in her wonderful introduction, my name is Laura Horodecki. My pronouns are she and her, and I have the good fortune to work as part of the Huddle Backbone team in the role of evaluation and research lead. Just before we begin, I'd like to say thank you and make wedge to the team at Access Open Minds Indigenous Youth Mental Health and Wellness Network for inviting Gladys and I here to share a little bit about our work with you today. Also, thank you to Elder Tecumseh for the beautiful opening today. I've attended many of these gatherings, and I have to say each time I leave with a feeling of hope, and I'm always thankful for the learning and the teachings offered to me. And so, in the spirit of reciprocity, I hope that we can offer the same for you here today.
Beautiful, thank you. Yes, that opening was so lovely. Really felt like um, all of the teachings were making their way through my spirit and really bringing me into the shared space with you all. So thank you so much for that opening. As in the introduction, we are located in different spaces and different places, and in the work that I've done with Huddle with Laura, I know that they really like to start the work that we do every time we get together in a good way, and part of that means beginning with acknowledging the lands that we're on and where we're our relationship with where we're located. So I will share again, I am on the lands of the Duwamish and Suquamish, just outside Seattle, Washington. I've been here with my family since 2018. Also, I've called home so many different places. I was born on Treaty 1. My traditional territories are on Treaty 5. I've lived many years in Treaty 6, and my kids were all born in Treaty 7. So lots of different relationships and places that I call home. And I often reflect on and think about, what that means to me and what that responsibility calls me forward in terms of knowing the peoples that of the lands that I'm living on. And for me here in Seattle, it's a really beautiful space, and I'm still getting to know all of the folks who are part of the Indigenous communities here. There's over 80,000 urban Indigenous folks in King County, which is a small portion of Washington state. And so there's quite a diversity. And when we think about the lands of the Duwamish peoples, who are not a federally recognized tribe. There's a lot of the politics involved there. They are a state recognized tribe here in the Seattle area. They have a website that's called Real Rent for the lands of the Duwamish peoples, and folks in the area can actually contribute monthly to supporting the Duwamish nations and the longhouse that they have here, and thinking about what it means to live in good relations with the ancestors here. So when I moved here, that was one of the first things that I learned and that I was able to support. So grateful for sharing that experience. And I'll pass to Laura.
Thanks, Gladys. So for myself and the Huddle team, we acknowledge that our work in what is known as Manitoba, takes place across the homelands of the Anishinaabe, the Anishinaabe, Cree, Dene, Dakota, and Red River Métis people. And this land is also host to our Inuit neighbors. We acknowledge that the water that we drink comes from Treaty 3 territory of Shoal Lake 41st Nation, and also our electricity, which is powering this call today, comes from Treaty 5 territory. Today, as I was thinking about offering a land acknowledgement, and also now looking outside my window at the snowflakes that are falling, and also going back to, what Elder Tecumseh mentioned about the transition of the seasons, I was thinking about the upcoming winter equinox and really just that change of seasons. And so in the work that we are doing, Gladys and I and the Huddle Network and youth and all of our partners, um, this journey is also really about changing the way that we consider evaluation and also who is involved in that consideration. And so as we get started today in a good way, I will share that this work feels like a beautiful opportunity for that kind of change. Okay, so I thought maybe I'd share just a little bit about Huddle to provide some context for our presentation. So as Vijay mentioned, Huddle is an integrated youth services or IYS network in the province of Manitoba. We have 6 sites right now currently operating. There are 4 in Winnipeg, there is 1 in Brandon, and 1 in Selkirk. And we also have 2 sites that are in development. One will be coming in Portage La Prairie and also one coming in Northern Manitoba, which we're really excited about. Huddle offers a wide range of trauma-informed, culturally safe services and programs centered on the needs of youth in the communities in which the Huddle sites are located. We are guided by our Indigenous partners in all aspects of our work, in both our research through IYSnet and also our practice as a Huddle backbone team and across the Huddle network. So on the slide, we've highlighted the words of youth who have been involved in our journey. And I invite you to read the quotes as I share just a little bit about how the work with Gladys came to be. This might be familiar to many of us, how evaluation can sometimes feel. It might feel imposed, restrictive, extractive. Often it could be driven by the needs of others and less so by the needs of youth. And so as we reflected on our common evaluation framework at Huddle and through conversations with and learning from youth, families, and our partners in our wide Huddle network, it was clear that we needed to expand that circle. And then at the same time, through a relationship with one of our amazing Huddle lead agencies, we came to be connected to Dr. Rowe, or Gladys, as our relationship deepened. And so eventually, Gladys and I were able to connect over coffee and a hug, and from there, a fire was lit. And then, over many conversations and many emails, we came to vision together and map out our journey, which we will share with you throughout our presentation today. So over to you, Gladys.
Fantastic. Thanks, Laura. Yes, I still remember that coffee. It was a beautiful little spot that we found in Winnipeg together. So for me, I've been working in the space of Indigenous and decolonial evaluation, community work for almost 2 decades now. My very first project was in 2007, and I talk about that as being a really transformational experience for me, where I got to understand that community, Indigenous voices and priorities actually can be the driver and make the difference towards programming and change that is meaningful for them, through a demonstration of that happening in a project that I got to be involved in as a research assistant. And so over the many years of learning how to do this work in a good way, which has often been counter to my formal quote unquote training in post-secondary education in what it meant to do evaluation. So I want to talk a little bit about, for me, what Indigenous and decolonial evaluation really fundamentally is. And in my introduction, as you noted, and I can share a link in a moment, I have a whole podcast. There's 4 seasons where I talk with folks about what this looks like and feels like in practice. So really, this is fundamentally about who gets to ask what questions in order to understand what success is. It's really about shifting the paradigms around what gets to count as knowledge and evidence to honor diverse and Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing. I'm sure this is familiar with many of you. So as we began to imagine the partnership together for Laura and I, it was coming from that fundamental understanding that what we're doing is shifting the paradigm. And it's about making space for what evaluation can feel like, look like, and sound like when it's something that's very different from what we've understood as traditional evaluation. So I'll share some of what those things are that we imagine together. So this work, Indigenous evaluation feels like something that's relational, grounded in trust and responsibility. It's spacious enough to allow us to slow down and to listen deeply. It's reciprocal, and so creates a space that when people share their story, we also share back, and we share back with clarity, care, and to demonstrate what we're learning because we have heard the story. It feels like creating conditions where honesty and vulnerability are safe and prioritized and taken care of in a really spirit-centered way. It looks like youth naming what safety and dignity mean in their own words, and you'll hear some of those own words in a moment here. It looks like teams learning together and challenging assumptions and coming to maybe a different understanding of what things like belonging might mean. creating conditions where curiosity, humility, and honest dialogue can take place. And it sounds like youth really knowing what they need and us listening to that feedback. It sounds like systems change through relationships and making space for that shift from expectation of data as being a primary source of evidence, quote unquote, data from quantifiable sources, and understanding that there's a holistic picture that needs to emerge through a braiding together of methodologies. So decolonial approaches really disrupt those extractive patterns that I learned all about in that first position back in 2007. I was embedded within the Faculty of Medicine and really learned about that extractive research practice that happened in Manitoba with our many, many First Nations. So when we listen differently, our actions shift. And so for me, that's what Indigenous and decolonial evaluation can sound like. And it's really important because we know that youth know what they need, and that systems change happens through relationship. And so Huddle and how I understand Huddle and a lot of the integrated youth service work that's happening nationally is the building of an ecosystem. And that ecosystem is really rooted in equity, care, and youth leadership. And so I was really excited to be invited into this work because it aligns so greatly with how myself and my team show up. That really isn't simply a methodology. It's rooted deeper in relationships and story and creativity and holding up community-defined impact.
And so our purpose in this journey together is to build a measurement and learning system that reflects the heart of Huddle. That also reflects youth dignity, belonging, safety, creativity, relationships, and community. We want an evaluation approach that helps us learn, adapt, and stay grounded in what truly matters to youth. And so as part of exploring our purpose, Gladys came to our team and guided our team through some big conversations where we deeply considered really big questions, such as what values will guide our work together? What is the vision of this work? What opportunities do we have to transform what evaluation can look, feel, and sound like, just like how Gladys just described? And so this relationship building and foundation laying was essential to the journey ahead. And Gladys will now share what that has looked like so far.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll walk you through a little bit of a timeline when we began our partnership back in March 2025. And when I say we have taken the opportunity to slow down, the months in this timeline have really morphed, but they're held within the container of March to March. But we've taken the pace and the strategy of being responsive and listening and taking the time to do this work in a good way. So the in-between has definitely been flexible. And I also like to say, you know, as a facilitator, I am nothing but flexible. I can make things happen in the container you give it to me. So in May, so we started off, you know, in March and April doing a lot of groundwork, contextualization. In May, we came together for the first time as over 3 days in various configurations, and really we wanted to spend time to understand how we work with youth currently, how Huddle works with youth, whose knowledge has been shaping the tools, could shape the tools, and what a holistic understanding might look like, feel like, and sound like. And so, as Laura said, we really started with understanding what values need to guide the work, and then really thread those through with what values are showing up for youth across the sites and across within the different levels of the network. And right from the outset, values like love, belonging, safety, and a desire to decolonize how we evaluate were named across all of the engagements with youth and staff and partners. And that early foundation setting of getting on the same page, really listening and coming to a common understanding, that early work grounded the whole process throughout. By July, our work came back again. From May, we did some synthesizing and sense making and came back together in July for another round of in-person sessions. And that work really shifted us into a deeper listening space. And so again, youth, staff, and partners gathered, and we really prioritized creative arts-based sessions. So in all of our engagement sessions, we rolled up with things to create collages, to work with Play-Doh, to use stickers, to create murals, to do some reflective writing. And these are really the methods of meaning making that I incorporate into all aspects of the work that we do together. In these spaces, youth articulated Huddle as a place of love, fun, stability, and connection, and they began shaping what meaningful evaluation could look like from their perspectives. I remember one of the conversations we were having, there were some new youth who came into the space who hadn't been involved in the May sessions, and Laura will talk a little bit about what that looked like. But I asked the question, I said, what does evaluation mean to you? What has been your experience with evaluation? And one of the young folks said to me, I really think when I think evaluation, I think of the beep test that I have to take in gym. And it's like this beep and it measures whether I'm running fast enough. And sometimes I don't. And so I fail and I have to end at a certain point in time. And so that was a really interesting conversation generator to think about, context with evaluation and how we can I talk about my work as healing and reinvigorating what evaluation could actually be. And so that was a really great conversation. So from that space in July, we did some more sense making, meaning making, honing in and really starting to define what it was we were creating. And in October, our focus, we came back together for alignment and design. We revisited and explored some of the metaphors that came forward for Huddle's theory of change and began to braid together 3 forms of data that we were hearing really as important processes in this framework that we're building: lived experience, creative expression, and quantitative information, and how all of those might come together to tell a holistic story. So in October, this really helped us to clarify direction and prepare for what comes next. This month, so November, we met again with the Youth Advisory Council to review the theory of change and to explore some youth-led evaluation tools. And the youth affirmed the direction of the theory of change, and they really felt that aligned with the core values that they've been naming throughout the year, which are authenticity, belonging, decolonization, and youth leadership. They offered us some really meaningful refinements in that theory of change, and they also helped us to consider 3 potential evaluation tools, emphasizing when we got the feedback from them, they really emphasized us thinking about safety, accessibility, creativity, and flexibility in those 3 evaluation tools. And it was hard, but we honed in with the Youth Advisory Council towards 2 possible tools for expression and storytelling. And they really helped us to have an in-depth conversation around which tool they would like to carry forward and co-develop. And so the next plan for the phase of this work is to work with the Youth Advisory Council to co-develop this one tool that will then move forward into our first prototype as we move into 2026. So for me, all the way throughout, the youth advisory councils and youth from the various sites have been really showing up with honesty, with courage, with humor, with creativity, and such a deep sense of wisdom in what's important, what's been important in their journeys, the interactions that have made them feel safe, and the way that they want to be able to ensure that the sites are accessible for other youth that come after them. So they haven't just responded to questions. It hasn't just been this extractive space. They've really dug deep with us. They've asked hard questions that help us to challenge some maybe assumptions that I held. They expanded our thinking. They offered visions for what an evaluation that they are excited about building with us, one that's rooted in care and in joy. And they've really asked us to think about this vibe of success of Huddle, and that it's actually about joy and safety and belonging. This isn't an abstract vibe, it's an actual lived, created, and sustained vibe that is driven by their youth voice. And so it's really been important for us to prioritize youth decision making at every single stage of the journey that you've seen in that timeline. And so Laura's going to talk a little bit more about the session attendance and some of the things that have come up as we learn about youth decision making in our work.
Thanks, Gladys. So, yeah, as Gladys shared, youth are showing up in this journey and are really leading the way forward. And I just love this quote from a youth who is also a Huddle team member. On reflecting about her experiences with evaluation, she said, I'll give you an answer, but it's not going to be like a small answer. And I think that that's kind of an accurate reflection of the spirit of our journey so far. And so, yeah, we wanted to share an example of a change we made along the way in this journey and some reflection on that change. So, as Gladys shared earlier, we held group sessions in May. And so, in that series, we had 2 daytime sessions with Huddle staff, partners, and our provincial government colleagues. And then we also had a youth only session. And it worked well. However, in our reflections and in planning for the July sessions, we had another idea. We thought, what if we opened up all 3 sessions to youth? We could still hold the evening only session, and that was really important for accessibility. So we decided to try it out, and the results were really tremendous. We had youth attend all 3 sessions, and having the voices of youth in the sessions with our network partners and our government colleagues made for just a really much richer, deeper level of conversation and really created a new understanding. And I feel like those sessions turned out to be just really very meaningful. And I just have to give a little shout out here to the Huddle Taco that you see on your screen. This was created by one of our youth advisors. And so Fabian described the layers of the Huddle Taco this way. So the pink layer at the bottom represents youth. The blue layer in the middle represents staff. And the red at the top is the community that is created. And then the shell is the taco being wrapped by Huddle. So that's really pretty cool for us. Yeah, and so as we both shared across the sessions, youth have really defined clear priorities for us for this evaluation. These include how belonging, safety, and love are experienced, how accessible Huddle feels, like physically, emotionally, culturally. What is it that keeps youth coming back or not? How to strengthen relationships with funders, and creative ways to share what we learned through art, through stories, through videos, comic books, and social media. And these priorities are shaping the design of our evaluation tools and our learning system. Youth and partners also clearly articulated the values to guide this work, which you see on this slide. And so we wanted to share a little bit about how these values might show up in our practice. So love and care, that might look like relationships built on trust, empathy, and authentic presence. Belonging and safety, that looks like creating, cozy environments that invite youth to be their full selves. And safety is defined by those most affected. Inclusivity and accessibility means representation across gender, culture, ability, and experience. And it also means removing barriers to participation. Creativity and joy. So, evaluation is a space for expression through art, stories, and humor. Accountability and reciprocity looks like holding ourselves and our systems responsible to youth, and evaluation as mutual learning. Decolonization and systems change means challenging colonial assumptions of success and reimagining how we relate, decide, and care. And youth leadership, well, youth are leading, designing, analyzing, and sharing. Adults and funders practice deep listening and follow.
Fantastic. So you've seen some photos of the art that we had a chance to create during our different sessions. And art and creativity, like I said, has been this constant thread in our process and really is a core way to support youth and partners to engage, reflect, and make meaning through collage, markers, stickers, Play-Doh, journaling, visual mapping. We have really made space for nuanced stories to be able to be shared. Partners used art-based mapping, postcards, symbols, and metaphors to really hone in on the story of Huddle and reflect the values, relationships, and the levels of distance change that we're working at creating. Across all of these sessions, people were able to use art to access ways to tell their story. So, art and creativity in how we plan our sessions really isn't necessarily living as a final output, but helps to gather thoughts, to gather emotions, to gather our thoughts together, to prepare us to show up, whatever it is we'd like to voice into the conversation space. Art can be, it can be an output itself as well. It can be something that is the final story or the final representation of what wants to be shared. And so we really played around with how creativity can allow different voices to show up in the ways that feel most comfortable. And so creativity felt like it unlocked a space for that to happen, especially in those diverse groups in July where there was folks from all different partner levels in the room. The art really created that conversation space within the room. So it was beautiful to see. When we think about what's ahead, our journey continues. Like you saw in the timeline, we still have a lot of pieces that we want to make sure to cover together in imagining and redefining what evaluation looks like with this Huddle space. And so as we look ahead, our work in December, we are planning to work with youth to refine this youth developed evaluation tool. And early in the new year, they will walk alongside us in testing out that tool across sites, to gathering feedback, making any revisions, and finalizing the tool that will be able to be used by youth in their evaluation work across all sites in Huddle, Manitoba. So that's a little bit about our journey. It's been great sharing with you, and we would love to have any conversation or questions.